everyone, and welcome to another episode where I am talking with some of the composers from my upcoming album, Delta Waves. Today, we're here with Griffin to talk about his piece that will be finished very, very soon.
Yes, en route.
Yes, thank you,
The
Griffin, for being
freshest,
here.
the freshest one on the album. Maybe, is that right? Probably.
Yes, yeah, you're the only one from 2021. I think there's a couple pieces from 2020, but
Cool.
you're the one in 2021.
Hot off the presses.
Yes, exactly. Hopefully, hopefully no more COVID by the end. the
Fingers
year that's better
crossed.
than 2020. Yes.
It seems like we're going in a good direction. I feel like every time I open social media, everyone's like, "I got my ouchie." So it's we're going in a solid direction. I feel good about that.
Exactly. See, positivity. That's how we like to start these.
Yeah.
Positivity, I guess.
Yeah.
But anyways, speaking of your piece, you want to talk a little about it, how it came to be, how we met each other, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as we discussed before, the way that we met, I mean, we both now go to Michigan, but when we both put onto the internet that we were going to Michigan, our mutual friend Kincaid was like mutual snitch tag and put us both in a tweet and was like, you two, you need to do work together. And so I think
I just randomly got a message. Kincaid tagged you in something. What did they do?
yeah, exactly. But yeah, I'm super glad they did, because then I can't remember. I think I reached out and was like, hey, we should probably do that. I would love to.
Yeah, I think we messaged each other, then we just called and talked for an hour and a half, just talked about the tenor saxophone and
and it's desperate need for more repertoire. Yeah, absolutely.
Very much.
So yeah, and I'm so like geeked about digging into sax repertoire now that I'm here, because I didn't know before coming here that this was like the epicenter of saxophone music. So aside from writing it, I'm also just encountering more of it. I'm sort of like able to immerse myself a little bit, just because it was a subset of new music that I didn't. Hey.
Hi, Mulligan. So Mulligan's finally making an appearance.
Hi, Mulligan. Sandy's right down here. Yeah.
Hi, bud.
Here. Got
here, Mulligan. You want to say hi?
Double cat showing.
Mulligan.
She's like, "What are you doing?"
Oh, he's biting me. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. But no, U of M. I feel like especially our saxophone studio is very hungry for new music, and we're very good friends with all of the fantastic composition studio.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, it's even just in the however many months we've been here, like 7, something like that. I feel like I've been able to encounter digitally even a bunch of really, really cool stuff. So
it's simultaneously been forever, and I feel like we just got here.
I agree. It's either been 30 years or about 4 days. It's there is no middle ground. It's one of those things.
Exactly.
So yeah, that's essentially how this kicked off. Is we both got mutually snitch tagged by Kincaid, and then we kicked it off. Yeah.
We have Twitter.
Twitter. I mean, I gotta say, I work with a lot of people because of Twitter.
Yeah.
People can naysay it. I do not naysay it.
It's a great marketing tool.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing. So I will let me couch that statement. It can be a good thing.
There we go. Better
sometimes
save ourselves before people get angry.
Right. It can be a good thing. Sometimes it is a lot, but in this case, it was a very good thing.
Yes. And I remember when we talked, you talked about your love for giving instruments that desperately need new music.
That was sort of part of the deal. It's sort of been weirdly built into a lot of projects I'm doing lately. Writing a lot more chamber music and just happening to get connected with folks and instruments that have some solid rep, but also just like not as much as your violins and your clarinets and your flutes, So this piece is obviously chiefly among them. I'm writing a English horn piece. I'm writing a viola sonata. I'm writing a classical guitar piece, and just it's it's weird that when we're in this kind of era of this overflowing of new music, I feel like there's so many composers out there doing so many things. We're very stylistically open. There's all kinds of great stuff going on, and there's still instruments that are kind of like outside of the norm somehow. Even though we're kind of breaking down those norms, there's still instruments that just don't have enough stuff somehow. So yeah, I don't know. It seems like an easy fix, which is like a lot of people want to write music. A lot of these instruments need music smushed together, but so yeah. So that's kind of been a little recent soapbox of mine.
And the tenor saxophone desperately needs it. I mean, that's the entire point of all these talks and the entire point of the album in the first place, is that the tenor saxophone just gets a bad rap, in my opinion. And 21st Century sometimes gets a bad rap. And all 11 pieces on this album are so wildly different that I feel like anyone going in with any misconceptions about 21st century music or the tenor saxophone will hear something that they were not expecting.
Yeah. I mean, even just from the bits and bobs that I've heard from other people's works, it's gonna be a whole rainbow of things in the coolest way possible.
Yes, there is no like theme to this other than 21st century tenor saxophone.
Yep. Hey, what are you doing?
But that was the goal of it, and I think it's working out quite nicely.
And here it is. Yeah, absolutely. The so I recently wrote a chamber cello concerto, and I was talking to a bunch of cellists about cello concerti, and a lot of them, sort of like other things we've been talking about recently, said, there's a lot of them out there, and also only so many of them are good. And weirdly, and this sounds so oversimplified and so dumb, but I literally think it's just because it's a lower voice. There's something about like the very, very, very boxed in, like hyper sort of classical like idea of like chord building and orchestration is like, melody up here and then other stuff. And so having an instrument that's down here, you just have to think about things differently. And you just have to like rearrange and sort of like restructure. And there are plenty of places that do that well. But I think a lot of the reasons that some of these sort of outside contenders don't make the cut is because they just try to treat it like writing a violin concerto. You know what I mean? And that's not exactly what's going to work. Trying to like treat it like a completely different instrument is of course not going to be the thing. Right. Yeah.
No, I feel the same way, and especially like growing up as a saxophonist, I feel like you always throw your best soprano, like your best saxophonist on soprano. Like that's just how it always works, at least in what I've noticed in middle school and high school education. And so then that kind of just leaves whoever wants tenor and Barry, I guess. And Barry,
right?
Especially in chamber music, because Barry, like, you are the root constantly. So that just kind of leaves tenor in this weird middle ground of I'm the third, and
right, exactly,
gets forgotten.
Yeah, it's it's like you need solid folks to hold the top and the bottom, and the middle is like and other dots, not. And as a vocal tenor myself, that's I mean a vocal tenor and a tenor saxophone have their own very specific quirks, but sometimes they fall in the same cracks. Yeah.
I feel like even talking about tenor saxophone sonatas, because that's what your piece is. I mean, you got the M. William Carlin's music for tenor saxophone and piano. You got the Deepak Squall's sonata for tenor saxophone. Then 21st century music. We don't have standards in the tenor saxophone repertoire. I mean, we have like the Villalobos Fantasia, but that's a soprano piece that people play on tenor. And that's a concerto anyways. So when it comes to tenor saxophone sonatas, there's just not I feel like there aren't a lot to even choose from.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where this is one of those situations where I wish I could like Professor X just like VoIP into everyone's brains and be like, there must be other ones out there, right? You know what I mean? There's just like hidden in some drawer somewhere or something. But as it stands, like like documentation wise, like those are the main ones to go to.
Yes.
And and yeah, I think that's part of the reason why I'm so thankful that you're making this album, is that one of the most crucial parts about commissioning or sort of supporting new music is documentation and like letting people know that it exists. Because if you just commission a thing and get a score and perform it and like perform it for people live in a room, that's fantastic, and we love you for it, and we will like click our heels like a cartoon leprechaun. But also that it's hard, like sometimes it's much harder for that thing to sort of thread off into other things, just because it's so contained to be like person to person audience, that's it. So having a recording like this is a really 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 sort of crucial way to get that word out there, to be like, also check this out, like you can dive into any of this music that you want and just sort of like give it a test run.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that's exactly what I'm hoping for. Like, I don't want this album to be, look how cool I am, look how high I can play, look how fast I can play, I'm so awesome, you should love me. That's not what I'm going for at all. Like, the reason I'm doing these composer talks is, I mean, you guys are the one actually making the art. I'm just pressing buttons. And I want to really showcase your guys, what you guys are doing as well. Like, I want this to be a collaborative thing and not just all about me.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you are absolutely doing art, and I will push back on you against that. But I totally understand that it is sort of, it's not just meant to be like a putting any one of us on a pedestal. It's kind of like adding to this thing that hopefully other people can take things away from as well.
And even going,
we're not,
yeah, and I mean with this album, there's a couple pieces that are longer tenor sax and piano pieces. I believe yours is the only one that actually is a sonata, like named by the composer. But like Candey's piece is also going to be 10+ minute tenor sax and piano, romance for tenor sax and piano. And then a lot of the other works are shorter than that, but I believe you two have the longest works on the album.
Yeah. I really and I really appreciate it. Sort of right off the bat that you were like, I've listened to your stuff, and I really do want something that is like tuneful and like that really kind of like it focuses on that. And I was like, that's great, cool. I'm totally down for that.
Because I think that falls into the other problem with the tenor saxophone is you have hyper jazz influenced music that we've talked about quite a lot, or you have multiphonics and craziness. And I love multiphonics and craziness, and I can get behind a good jazz influenced work, but just that middle ground I feel like is really missing. Of just the tenor saxophone is pretty and fun, like it doesn't need to be this just absolutely crazy thing.
Right. Yeah, I totally, it's in talking about things that don't have core repertoire, I think it's part of it. I mean, it's extremely individual per instrument, but like for some things that don't have as much rep, like the tenor sax, or like the classical guitar, or like the English horn, or like whatever, a lot of it is because when people do approach it now, I almost feel like they unconsciously assume that like the core kind of like music that is like something that could be approached by someone who isn't like the highest level of hyper technical person could do. You know what I mean? Like there is a lot of like piano and violin rep that can be done by a bunch of sort of beginning to middle layers of folks in like steps of their learning. But for, so only writing things that can be done by primarily superhuman people is totally cool, and like a thing that I also have done sometimes, depending on the situation. But like for stuff like this, I would really love to have to sort of help create more rep that isn't just feasible for superhumans,
Yes, I agree completely. With the tenor saxophone, so many of the pieces, it's like graduate level repertoire. And like we have so much of it that sometimes I feel like good undergrad repertoire, beginning graduate student repertoire, we need it.
Yeah,
It just
that is
doesn't.
in no way to say I think this piece is also going to be hard, but hopefully
Yes,
like
I've seen
satisfyingly hard.
no,
So
what I've seen so far is fantastic, and that transitions smoothly into talking about the piece. So you want to share the compositional process behind the piece, the title behind, and themes behind the piece, anything like that?
yeah, so let me fully unmute that. Yeah, so the piece overall is called "A Triumph for the Persistently Nice," which is a phrase that I snagged from a blog post actually, and it kind of a little bit applies to basically like the idea of being generous with yourself, like kind of how one becomes selfless. It was specifically an article about John Verrall, who was a composer, like a 20th century composer in the Pacific Northwest. And I found out about him because he was one of Bill Bolcom's teachers, and I was reading about Bill Bolcom. Obviously, connections to University of Michigan. So, and John Verrall was sort of a really lovely composer and has a lot of really lovely music out there. The recordings are kind of sparse, but the stuff that I've heard has been sort of neo-romantic, very pleasant music. But he's like largely remembered in sort of the communities that he lived in for being a really, really kind of influential teacher for a bunch of people. Basically, sort of his whole life was spent giving to others. And so I kind of had this image of like selflessness and giving of self, and basically how does one get to that point? And so I kind of wanted these movements to kind of like be a trajectory to that. Like, how do we get to being able to be giving of ourselves? And so I've been working in a lot of 3 movement formats, so I just stuck that on. And so that's the title movement is the last movement. The second movement is basically like, to get here, you have to also be giving to yourself. You have to take care of yourself. You have to, appreciate yourself and love yourself, and sort of, it's hard. You can't get here without that. And so the second movement is sort of to the idea of sort of like getting to the point of being comfortable with yourself, comfortable enough that you can give of yourself, that you want to give of yourself. That movement's called Small Panacea, which is taken from a poem by John Ashbery. I was blanking on his name. It's actually a very lovely poem from there's in the Walker Art Museum in Minneapolis, St. Paul. There's this bridge. They have this sort of external garden that has this big bridge that they commissioned, and then they commissioned John Ashbery to write a poem that's on the bridge. And there's a phrase. This phrase, "Small Panacea and Lucky for Us," is part of the poem, and so that phrase kind of came to mind with that. And then sort of before that, to go from like giving of self to like comfortable with self, the first one is not that. is sort of being in a state of internal conflict, essentially. Like the title is "Twice for Flinching," which is like the like toxic masculinity situation of like going to hit somebody. Like, I don't know if that people did that to you as a kid, but like they go to hit you, and if you flinch because you don't want them to hit you, they hit you twice because you flinched. Yes. And so I was thinking of that in the way that we like kind of like infinitely tie ourselves up with anxiety. Of like, I'm worried about this thing, and then I'm like mad at myself for being worried about it, and then I'm like just like this kind of like eternal like Ouroboros eating its tail of like, I'm anxious about this thing. Oh, I feel like I shouldn't be anxious about that thing. I'm just like this kind of like constant layers. Yeah. And how that's just a completely self-defeating idea. So yeah, it's really going from kind of like this like disjunct like sort of jagged idea of like not basically being like the prickliest version of yourself, to being a centered version of yourself, to being able to like live outside of yourself and not sort of like be stuck in that pattern. So,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, it's yeah, 3 movements, probably not going to be a ton longer than like 12 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah, I'm super geeked to send you more. I have a lot more than last time that we talked, and
Yeah, last time we talked, you sent a decent amount of the first movement,
yep.
which all sounds great. Dr. Ames is going to sound fantastic on the piano part.
Nice. I'm glad that she's playing it because it's not an easy piano part. um, so yeah, yeah. The only other sort of musical stuff to add there is the only like real influence, like structural influences that the um, I was thinking about in thinking about the second movement of things that are feel kind of like centered and like I don't know, like calming and level. I was thinking of um, other concerti, just because I've been writing them lately,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's I kind of wanted to be like a kind of slow waltz, like the second movement of Ravel's Piano Concerto in G, or like the opening to Copland's Clarinet Concerto, like that. This kind of like very like steady. Sorry, there's a large truck outside. Very steady, kind of like pattern of three that just kind of like carries you from like a warmer place to a warmer place to a warmer place, like
Mm-hmm.
kind of slowly opening up. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, I mean that all sounds fantastic. I'm super excited for it, and we're both very thankful for we received a grant to help cover some of the funding for
Yeah.
this from the University of Michigan. So huge thank you to Arts Engine for helping make this project possible. Yeah, so we're going to do the premiere of it, like a digital premiere, sometime over the summer, and then
Yeah.
have this as a separate little recording for the CD.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I'm excited for both versions. It'll be nice to have options going ahead.
Yes, exactly. Like we were talking about earlier, the whole idea of documentation. I think this just leads to more avenues for people to be able to find out about the piece, which
Yeah.
is always welcomed.
Agreed.
Yeah, so I'm super excited to see the rest of it. Super excited to see what else you have come up with so far. So far, everything I've seen is great. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be just what the tenor saxophone needs. Just I think what this album needs. A nice longer piece to hold everything together. So thank you again. That's going to be fun.
Thank you. I'm super geeked to be part of it. Yeah, I'm excited to get everything up on its feet.
So, anything else you want to add? This is your time for shameless self-promotion or to plug anything. Where can people find you?
Yeah, I am on most social media things just with the at my name spelled like my name, Griffin Candey. Mostly Twitter and Instagram, also technically Facebook.
Follow his Twitter. His Twitter's great.
Thanks.
Would recommend.
It's because I spend too much time on it. And I guess shameless plugging. I've got a chamber opera premiering digitally this spring with Baldwin Wallace University / Cleveland Opera Theater. They kind of did they're doing a spring digital festival of like 8 chamber operas that they commissioned for COVID times. Just playing in the space. Let's see. I've got your piece. I've got some premieres coming up on people's recitals. Donchi, I wrote her some violin miniatures. I've got that chamber cello concerto that I mentioned happening with Chai Collaborative in Chicago in, I believe, April. Provided things remain on course. So yeah, and after that, a host of other things. So
yeah, you think you have free time, but something will come up. I promise.
never. It'll never happen.
You are busy as ever, aren't you?
Yeah, I say that gratefully. That's if there's nothing on the plate, then that's a tough road to hoe.
Yeah, being busy is fun. So thank you all so much for tuning in. If you're interested in learning more about the album, ways you could support the album, seeing more videos like this, me talking to composers, upcoming performances that include music off the album, please go to andrewhostler.com/deltawaves. You can find all the information there, plus a lot more. So thank you again, Griffin, and thank you all.
Thank you.